A single dad sings to his daughter every morning at the bus stop, unaware that one day, a stranger filming from her car window will change everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The morning air was cool, crisp enough to make Jack Sullivan's breath visible as he pulled his worn flannel tighter around his shoulders. The sun had barely crested the rooftops, casting a soft golden hue over the quiet neighborhood. Beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, her backpack almost too big for her small frame, her cheeks rosy from the chill. "Cold this morning?" she murmured, rocking on her heels. Jack glanced down, his expression softening. "Want to warm up with a song?" Lily's eyes lit up instantly, the corners of her mouth tugging into a smile. She nodded. He cleared his throat, more from habit than necessity, and started in a low, easy tone of the old Motown songs his wife used to hum while folding laundry. His voice was rich, worn at the edges like a favorite denim jacket, but steady. Lily joined in for a few lines, her voice bright and clear, a perfect contrast to his. This was their thing. Rain, snow, or sun, Jack sang at the bus stop, not for an audience, not for attention but for her, to make her mornings lighter, to keep one piece of joy steady in their lives. Ever since Marcy passed 3 years ago, it had been just the two of them, and this small routine, this moment between the rush of breakfast and the screech of the school bus meant everything. Across the street, a few neighbors opened curtains. One or two paused to listen, smiling without interrupting. No one ever said anything directly, but the neighborhood had come to expect it. Jack and his girl, singing the day into motion. When the bus finally groaned up the road, Jack ended the song with a soft hum and a playful bow. Lily giggled, gave him a quick hug, and climbed aboard. "Have a good day, Peanut," he called, waving as the door shut. She pressed her hand against the window in farewell, her breath fogging the glass. Jack stayed there a moment longer, watching until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then he turned toward his battered pickup, unaware that just down the block someone had been sitting in a sleek black SUV, quietly watching and recording. The garage always smelled like a mix of motor oil, burnt coffee, and hard work. Jack Sullivan had stopped noticing the scent years ago. It was the air he breathed, the rhythm of his life. By 9 a.m., his hands were already stained with grease, and the collar of his flannel was damp with sweat despite the lingering chill outside. The first car of the day, a rusted-out Honda with a stubborn alternator, sat up on the lift, making its usual protest as he worked. Music played from the old radio wedged between a toolbox and a shelf of boltsome classic soul ballad crackling through dusty speakers. Jack sang under his breath while tightening bolts, his voice syncing perfectly with the melody. It wasn't for show. No one was around except the cat that sometimes wandered in through the back door. But music, even hummed in solitude, had a way of softening the edges of a long day. He glanced at the photo taped to the wall above his workbench. Marcy, holding a baby Lily, both smiling like they didn't know yet how brief that happiness would be. It still knocked the wind out of him sometimes, even 3 years later. Grief didn't vanish, it just got quieter, like a song fading out at the end. By lunchtime, Jack was elbow-deep in another job, this time a minivan with a failing starter. He wiped his forehead with a rag that had once been a t-shirt and checked the time. Lily would be out of school in a few hours. He liked to be the one waiting at the corner, even if she now insisted she was old enough to walk home by herself. He wasn't ready to give that up yet. A customer came in, a woman needing an oil change. Jack greeted her with the easy kindness that had earned him loyalty in this town. No upsells, no pressure, just honest work. That was the thing about Jack. He didn't chase dreams or fame. He fixed what was broken, showed up on time, and kept singing in the cracks of the day. Life was rough around the edges, but he carved out moments of melody where he could. And for now, that had to be enough. The traffic had thinned as the city gave way to the outer suburbs, where sidewalks were cracked and tree branches leaned low over telephone wires. Vanessa Blake didn't usually drive her self-chauffeurs, assistants. and tight schedules took care of that, but something about this week had driven her to escape. No meetings, no boardroom drama, no pitch decks or contracts. Just open roads, a thermos of black coffee, and silence. Her GPS had rerouted her down a smaller side street, one she didn't recognize. She slowed, not lost exactly, but unsure. The SUV purred softly as she pulled over beside a narrow stretch of curb, lined with single-story homes and early morning shadows. She reached for her phone, intending to check the route again, when she heard it. A man's voice. Low, smooth, slightly husky, and full of something she hadn't heard in a long time: warmth. The kind of voice that didn't need a microphone to move you. She turned toward the sound. Across the street, a man stood with a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, waiting by a crooked bus stop sign. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a flannel shirt, with worn jeans and boots dusted in gravel. The girl clutched her backpack straps while he sang, his hand tapping a soft rhythm against his thigh. They weren't putting on a show. It was just a moment, quiet, shared, and deeply real. Vanessa rolled down her window a crack, just enough to let the melody drift in. It was an old Sam Cooke tune, one of those timeless ones her father used to hum while frying eggs on Saturday mornings. She hadn't thought about that in years. The little girl smiled up at him, beaming. The man bowed dramatically as he finished the verse, and she clapped with delighted giggles. Vanessa's fingers hovered over her phone. On impulse, she tapped the camera icon and hit record. She wasn't sure why she did it. Maybe it was the way the music cut through the fog in her chest, or the way he looked at his daughter like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. Whatever it was, she sat there for a moment longer, watching. And for the first time in weeks, Vanessa Blake forgot she had somewhere to be. Vanessa held the phone steady, her thumb pressing the screen with more hesitation than she expected. She wasn't the type to film strangers especially, not like this. But something about the way that man sang, the way his daughter swayed gently beside him, as if she'd heard that song 1,000 times before, it tugged at something inside her, something buried. Something she hadn't touched in years. Her eyes misted as the song reached its final note, not from sadness, but from the ache of recognition, not of the man or the child, but of the feeling. That unmistakable tenderness between them. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't for show. It was love unpolished, ordinary, and deeply true. She watched as the little girl laughed, bumping her shoulder into her dad. He leaned down, ruffled her hair, and said something she couldn't hear. The moment passed quietly. No applause, no audience. Just a father and daughter sharing a ritual that likely meant nothing to the world and everything to them. Vanessa lowered her phone. The video was less than 30 seconds long. In her world-glossy stages, choreographed emotion, carefully constructed realness, authenticity was rare, maybe extinct. She'd built an empire, chasing voices, shaping them, selling them. But this wasn't a voice trained for charts or fame. It was something else entirely. A voice that didn't need a stage to be heard. She wiped at the corner of her eye quickly, almost irritated with herself. She didn't cry over things like this. She didn't stop for strangers. But here she was, unmoving in her luxury SUV, heart stirred by a man who likely didn't even own a proper microphone. The school bus appeared in the distance, its yellow shell blurring in the morning light. The girl stepped forward. The man waved. The moment ended as simply as it began. Vanessa blinked, started the car, and pulled away before the man ever noticed her. She didn't know what she would do with the recording, if anything. Maybe it would sit in her phone like a secret. Or maybe it would be the beginning of something. Either way, Jack Sullivan had no idea someone had been watching. Vanessa stared at the thumbnail on her phone long after she'd pulled into her office garage, engine ticking as it cooled. She hadn't replayed the clip yet. She didn't need to. The moment was still sharp in her memory. His voice smooth as honey, the little girl's face bright with affection. It was rare, unfiltered, and far too genuine for the world she lived in. She leaned her head back against the seat and sighed, phone still in her hand. A part of her wanted to delete it. It felt too intimate, like something sacred she had no business capturing. And yet, something inside told her it wasn't just her that needed to see it. Vanessa opened her encrypted industry group, Chata Small, trusted circle of producers, label scouts, and artists she'd worked with for over a decade. People who knew how to recognize magic when they saw it. She hovered for a moment, thumb hesitating over the message bar. Vanessa Blake. Saw this on the way to a meeting this morning. No name. No stage. Just a guy singing to his kid. Hit play. Tell me if I'm crazy. She attached the video, a beat. Then she hit send. Phone down. No second guessing. By the time she reached her office upstairs, a reply was already waiting. Raphael, AR Director. Who is this guy? Holy hell. That tone, that soul. I felt that in my bones. Then another. Talia, Indie Label Scout. Wait, is this real? This isn't staged? Ben, songwriter, producer. If that's not a signed artist, I'll eat my keyboard. Get his name. Vanessa leaned against her desk, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. She hadn't expected that. Not so quickly. Not so unanimously. It was rare they all agreed on anything. She tapped the screen off and slipped the phone into her pocket. Outside, the city buzzed and hummed like it always did, but somewhere far from the limelight, a man with grease on his hands and music in his chest had no idea that his world was about to shift quietly, unstoppably. The next morning, the cold had teeth. Frost laced the grass, rooftops glistened silver, and even the breath coming from Jack's mouth seemed to hang longer in the air, like it didn't want to leave. He pulled Lily's beanie down snug over her ears, then rubbed his hands together, trying to summon a little warmth. Same song? Lily asked, grinning up at him with sleepy eyes. Jack shook his head. Nah, thought I'd switch it up today. He cleared his throat and began to hum, easing into the first verse of A Change Is Gonna Come. It was a personal favorite Sam Cooke, at his most hopeful and raw. Jack's voice wrapped around the lyrics with quiet reverence, deep and textured like worn velvet. It wasn't polished, but it didn't need to be. It was honest. Lily leaned against his side, her gloved hand slipping into his, and for a moment the cold didn't matter. A few feet away, another family stood waiting. Jack hadn't seen them here before. A mother with a toddler strapped to her chest, and a boy in a red hoodie who stared openly at him, wide-eyed. When Jack finished the verse, the boy clapped twice, quickly, before his mother hushed him with an amused smile. Jack chuckled under his breath, offering a small wave. The woman returned it, a little surprised but not unkind. Two more parentspeople Jack had passed by for years, without a word were watching too. Not staring, not intruding, just present. One of them, an older man with a white beard and thermos in hand, gave Jack a nod that felt like something more than just neighborly. Jack shifted his weight. He didn't know what had changed, but something had. The air felt heavier with attention. Not bad, just different. He tried to brush it off, but the thought stuck with him like a chorus you couldn't shake. As the bus came around the corner, Lily squeezed his hand and smiled. Sing that one again tomorrow? Jack nodded, distracted, eyes scanning the street for nothing in particular. He didn't know that the world had started listening, and he didn't know it wasn't done. Julia Stanton stood at the top floor of her Manhattan office, staring out over the skyline with a quiet intensity. The morning light sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows, gilding the room in gold. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass-flawless navy suit, hair twisted into a sleek bun, phone in one hand, espresso in the other. The kind of woman who never forgot a meeting, never showed up second, and hadn't cried in public in over a decade. Stanton Records bore her name, but it was more than a legacy. It was a fortress built from broken promises, sleepless nights, and an obsession with perfection. She'd started in soundproof rooms, hunched over mixing boards, bleeding herself into every track. 20 years ago, she'd been the prodigithe girl who turned nobodies into platinum, a Grammy-winning producer by 30, a record executive by 35, and now? Now, She ran the empire. But lately, the music felt hollow, too polished, too scripted. Hits manufactured like soda pop sweet, quick, forgettable. Julia had made peace with that trade-off. Or at least, she thought she had. Until yesterday. She pulled out her phone and tapped the video again. The man's voice filled her office, even through tiny speakers. Warm, weathered, aching with soul. And the girl, his daughter, she assumed, beaming up at him, like he held the world in his throat. There was no mic, no studio, just love, melody, and raw honesty. She didn't even know his name, and still, she hadn't stopped thinking about him since. Her assistant knocked lightly on the door. "You've got 2 minutes before the artist briefing." Julia didn't turn. "Push it back 10. A pause." "Yes, ma'am." When the door clicked shut, Julia let the video play once more. She wasn't sure what she wanted. Yet a meeting, a demo, a conversation, but she knew talent when she saw it. And she hadn't felt this instinct in years. Not since the days before corporate dinners and quarterly reports. Somewhere out there, a man with oil on his hands and a voice like old vinyl was changing everything, and Julia Stanton was about to find him. Julia sat alone in the back seat of her car as it coasted through the late-night streets of Quarter de Marfort. Manhattan, city lights flashing across the tinted windows like memories she couldn't quite outrun. Her phone rested on her lap, dark now, but the sound of that man's voice still echoed in her ears. The way he'd sung, not just technically, but like the song came from someplace deeper, somewhere raw, familiar. She leaned her head against the glass, the cold pressing against her skin. It was late, but sleep had no grip on her anymore. It hadn't for years. Not since the nights when she'd lie awake listening for footsteps that never came home. Her father had been a musician too, in his own right. Not famous, not disciplined. Just a man with a guitar, a temper, and a heart too wild to stay anywhere for long. When Julia was 6, he promised her they'd go to a music store after school. Instead, he vanished for good. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just a silence that stretched for years. Her mother had done her best working double shifts, biting her tongue, trying to be both anchor and sail. But it was music that saved Julia. Tapes from the library, radio static late at night, a battered piano in the corner of the school auditorium. Notes became her compass, her rebellion, her armor, and later, her career. She built a fortress of melodies so strong no one could ever leave her again. At least, that's what she told herself. But then came that clip 30 seconds of a father singing to his daughter like she was the center of the universe. No stage, no audience. Just love and music, braided together, in the kind of moment she had long ago stopped believing in. Julia swallowed hard, pushing the ache back down where it belonged. It wasn't about her. Not anymore. Still, that voice had pulled at something she thought she'd buried for good. And that little girl's smile, it hit her like a song she hadn't heard in years but somehow remembered every word to. The car stopped at her penthouse. She didn't move. Some ghosts don't knock before returning. The bell above the garage door jingled as Julia stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the stained concrete floor. The air was thick with the scent of oil, rubber, and engine grease, earthy, mechanical, alive. It was the kind of place she hadn't set foot in for years, not since her early producing days when she used to scout talent in the most unexpected corners of the country. But back then, she wore sneakers and carried demo CDs. Now she wore a tailored wool coat and carried questions. The man she'd come to find was crouched under the hood of a pickup, his flannel sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands buried in the guts of an old engine. He hadn't seen her yet. "Be right with you," he called without looking up, voice calm and steady. Same voice, Julia thought. Same cadence that had stopped her in her tracks 2 mornings ago. She wandered slowly, pretending to glance at the dusty display of air fresheners and windshield wipers. The front desk was unmanned. A small space heater buzzed faintly near the counter. After another minute, he stood and wiped his hands on a faded blue rag. When he turned, she caught the recognition immediately. Not of her but of the moment. The warmth in his eyes, the practiced kindness. It was the same man, only now, face to face. "Morning," he said with a polite nod. "What can I do for you?" Julia kept her tone casual, masking the flutter in her chest. Check engine light came on, not sure why. He stepped forward, not in a rush, but with an easy focus. "What are you driving?" "Black Range Rover. Parked out front." Jack nodded. "Give me a few minutes, I'll take a look." She followed him outside and he popped the hood like he'd done it 1,000 times, and he probably had. Watching him work, Julia studied his face. Strong features, lined a bit at the eyes, but not from age, from life. She wasn't here for a signature. Not yet. She just wanted to know what kind of man could sing like that and mean every word. This wasn't a pitch. It was a beginning. Jack leaned under the hood with practiced ease, flashlight tucked in his hand, brows furrowed as he studied the engine. "You been hearing any strange sounds? Grinding, rattling, anything like that?" Julia shook her head. "No, just the light came on yesterday. Figured I shouldn't ignore it." He nodded. "Good call. A lot of people do wonder why their engines half melted 2 weeks later." His voice was calm, almost warm, but not performative. He didn't recognize her, not even a flicker. That alone unsettled Julia more than she expected. People usually knew Harif, not her face, then her name. They straightened up, tried to impress, flattered. He didn't. He was just Jack. Just the man from the video, just a mechanic doing what he always did, and somehow that was exactly what she hoped for. "Could be a sensor issue," he murmured, fiddling with a cable near the fuse box. "Might be nothing serious. I'll run a diagnostic real quick, just to be safe." She stood with her hands tucked in her coat pockets, trying not to look out of place in her tailored slacks and designer boots. In her world, everyone performed. They sold you something, even if it was just an illusion of humility. Jack, on the other hand, barely looked at her, more than necessary focused entirely on the task at hand. "You from around here?" he asked after a moment, still half buried in the engine. Julia hesitated. "No, just passing through." "Figured. Most locals drive beaters, not black SUVs that cost more than my shop." She smirked, despite herself. "That obvious?" He finally looked up, a crooked grin playing at the edge of his mouth. "Little bit." He didn't ask what she did for a living, didn't push for details. And Julia, used to people digging for relevance or favors, found the silence refreshing. "I'll get the scanner." "Shouldn't take long," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans before disappearing inside. Julia watched him go, wondering how someone so unassuming had managed to stir something in her she thought had long gone quiet. He had no idea who she was, and she wasn't quite ready to tell him. The afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the Warding Mordido neighborhood, painting long shadows across the sidewalk as the school bus rumbled up the street. Julia leaned against her SUV, engine checked, diagnostic complete. Jack had insisted it was nothing, just a temperamental sensor, but he'd refused payment all the same, shrugging it off with a, "Come back if it acts up again." She could have left. Should have, maybe. But something kept her parked at the curb just a little longer. From the corner of her eye, she saw her again, Lily. Backpack bouncing, boots scuffing the pavement, a whirlwind of energy wrapped in pigtails and a too-big hoodie. She ran full tilt toward the man waiting at the bus stop. "Daddy!" she called, and Jack opened his arms just in time to catch her in a half-twirl, laughing. Julia smiled. It was rare to see that kind of ease between Pio Plano strain, no awkwardness. Just natural connection, like they were born knowing how to make each other whole. "Guess what we did in music class?" Lily beamed up at him. "I got picked to lead the warm-up." Jack grinned. "Did you now? Must be all that practice you get every morning." Lily nodded, clearly proud. "Want to sing the one with the claps?" "Always." He looked around, not to check for an audience, but just to make sure she had space. Then he started clapping in rhythm, soft and slow. As Lily launched into a melody, Julia didn't recognize something playful, folky, full of joy. Jack joined in on the chorus, his voice anchoring hers like it always did. Calm, steady, strong. Julia watched from across the street, unnoticed, unmoving. There was something radiant about the girl, like she was made of light that hadn't dimmed yet. And Jack, he sang, not like a man trying to be heard, but like someone who already had everything he needed. Julia's throat tightened, an old ache surfacing again. This wasn't about potential anymore. This wasn't just a good voice or a marketable moment. This was rare. Real. She pulled out her phone, not to record but to type a name into her notes. Jack Sullivan. Voice, daughter Lily. Worth everything. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as Jack stepped inside, brushing the chill from his sleeves. He spotted her right away. Julia, seated near the back, a corner table half shielded by a potted ficus. She looked out of place in the small-town coffee shop, like a figure sketched in finer lines. Still, she stood when she saw him, offering a warm, practiced smile. "Appreciate you meeting me," she said as he approached. Jack gave a polite nod, tugging off his jacket. "Figured it'd be rude to turn down free coffee." She laughed, motioning for him to sit. "That's fair." They ordered her a black Americano, him a cinnamon latte that earned a teasing eyebrow. "Don't judge," he said with a smirk. "Mechanics can have taste." Julia sipped hers, eyes steady. "So tell me something, Jack. Where'd the voice come from?" He leaned back in the chair, thoughtful. "My mom sang in church. I used to sit on the floor near the piano, watching her. That's probably where it started. No training? Just life." He shrugged. "Played in a band a long time ago. Nothing serious." Julia tilted her head. "Why stop?" He hesitated. The air between them tightened for a beat. "Got married. Had Lily. My wife got sick a few years back. Everything else went quiet after that." The words weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. Julia nodded slowly, understanding more in what he didn't say. "You ever think about picking it back up?" Jack let out a low breath, staring into his cup. "Not really. Music's still part of my life, just not in a spotlight kind of way." "But what if it could be again?" she asked, tone light, casual on the surface, but every word measured. Jack chuckled. "You asking for a friend?" Julia smiled but didn't answer. They talked for another hour. About Lily. About the garage. About songs Jack wrote but never shared. She listened carefully, watching not just his face, but the way he held the memory as tenderly, like glass. By the time they parted, Jack still didn't know who she really was. But Julia? Julia knew exactly who he was, and she wasn't walking away. Jack didn't usually talk about the past, not because he was ashamed of it, but because most people didn't ask. They saw the mechanic's coveralls, the oil-stained hands, the quiet, grounded demeanor, and figured that was all there was. And most days, he let them believe it. But that evening, back at the garage with the last rays of sunlight filtering through the open bay doors, Julia lingered. Her Range Rover had been ready for hours, yet she hadn't driven off. Instead, she sat on the low stone ledge outside, sipping from a to-go cup, waiting like someone who wasn't quite finished with the conversation. Jack emerged from the workroom, wiping his hands on a rag. "You know," he said, leaning against the frame of the open garage, "there was a time I thought music was going to be it for me." Julia looked up. "You mentioned a band." He chuckled softly, the sound edged with nostalgia. "Yeah, just a little three-piece. Me, a guy on keys, and another on drums. We played dives mostly. Bars, street fairs. Took a shot at Nashville once. Drove out in a rusted-out van, full of hope and terrible snacks." "And?" Jack's smile faded a bit. "Didn't last. Got a call one night that my girlfriend Marcy had collapsed at work. She was sick. Rare condition. Chronic. Changed everything." Julia's expression softened. "So, you came home." "Didn't think twice. Packed up the gear, left the band. Music became something we did around the house instead." I'd sing to her when the pain was bad, sing to Lily when she couldn't sleep. He paused, jaw tightening slightly. After Marcy passed, I didn't have much left to sing about, except Lily. Julia studied him. You don't miss it? The stage? The crowd? He shook his head. I miss what it felt like. But I'd trade every stage for one more day with my girl laughing in the back seat. Music's not gone, it's just quieter now. He didn't say it to impress her. He said it because it was true. And in that moment, Julia realized he wasn't just a good voice. He was a story the world needed to hear. The hum of the garage had quieted. The tools were back on their hooks, the bay doors half closed, and the sky outside had dipped into soft lavender. Jack was closing out a long day, brushing grit from his palms and preparing to lock up, when Julia finally spoke the words she'd been circling around for days. I want to make you an offer, she said. Standing just inside the threshold, her voice calm but deliberate. Jack arched an eyebrow, wiping the back of his neck with a rag. You need another oil change already? Julia smiled faintly, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slim black business card. She handed it to him without a word. He took it slowly, squinting at the glossy print. Julia Stanton, CEO. Stanton Records. Jack blinked. Wait, Stanton? As in the Stanton? That's a record label. Julia nodded. Yes, it's mine. He looked at her again, more carefully, this time. You're telling me you run one of the biggest music companies in the country? And you've been hanging around my garage? I've also been watching you sing to your daughter at a bus stop, she said gently. I didn't come here by accident, Jack. There was a long pause. Jack looked down at the card, then back at her. His brow furrowed. You're serious? I am. You want me to, what? Sign something? Go viral? Put on a show for people who don't even know me? I want you to record one song, Julia said. Just a demo, no pressure, no contracts. Not yet. I think you have something real, and I want to help you share it. Jack laughed short, dry. Is this a joke? Are there cameras somewhere? There's no trick, Jack. Just an opportunity. He shook his head, stepping back. Look, I'm not interested in being someone's project. I have a daughter, a business, a life. Whatever you think I am, I'm not chasing dreams anymore. Julia's face remained calm, but something flickered behind her eyes. Disappointment, or maybe patience. All right, she said. But I'm not giving up that easily. Jack tucked the card into his back pocket, unreadable. He didn't say no outright. But for now, that was as close as it got. The sound of the wrench dropping onto the garage floor echoed louder than it should have in the quiet. Jack let it clatter and rolled his shoulders, muscles tight from a day that felt longer than usual. The black business card Julia had given him sat on the workbench, untouched since he'd pulled it from his pocket. The edges were crisp, the lettering precise, too sharp for the world he lived in. He stared at it like it might explode. That night, after dinner, he sat on the couch with Lily curled up beside him, her head on his shoulder, and a book open on her lap. She wasn't reading, just flipping pages lazily, humming one of the songs they often sang together. Her presence, small and steady, grounded him like nothing else ever could. Jack's mind, however, was miles away. What if Julia was serious? What if he said yes? He closed his eyes and imagined its studio lights, endless meetings, late nights. The music, yes, but also the pressure, the noise, the unpredictability. He'd walked away from all of that for a reason, for Lily, for Marcy, when she needed him most. And now here was this woman, dropping a spark into his life like it wasn't soaked in responsibilities. Was it selfish to want more? To even think about chasing a dream again? Lily stirred beside him. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? Are you sad? He glanced down, surprised. What makes you say that? You get that quiet look when you're thinking about Mom or something big. She studied him, serious in that way, only kids can be. Is it something big? He hesitated. Maybe. She nodded once, then leaned into him. You can talk to me, you know. I'm not a baby. Jack laughed softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I know you're not." They sat like that for a while, her flipping pages, him staring at the business card from across the room. He wasn't sure what scared him more, risking the life they'd built for something uncertain, or the thought that he might be too afraid to try. It was Saturday morning, and the house smelled faintly of pancakes and coffee, sunlight spilling across the worn hardwood floors. Jack stood at the sink, rinsing off plates, lost in his own head. He'd barely slept. The business card still sat on the mantel where he'd left it 2 days ago, untouched but not forgotten. Every time he passed it, something tugged at his chest. Lily sat at the kitchen table, a pencil in her hand, sketching in a spiral notebook. "Dad?" "Yeah?" he replied, stacking dishes. "Are you going to call the music lady?" Jack froze mid-movement, a plate dripping suds into the sink. He turned slowly. "What music lady?" Lily looked up, unbothered. "The one with the nice coat. The one you had coffee with. I saw her card on the mantel. It says she works with music people, right?" Jack sighed, drying his hands on a towel. "You're not supposed to go snooping through grown-up stuff, Bug." "I wasn't snooping," she said, undeterred. "It was sitting right out." He sat across from her, suddenly unsure what to say. "It's complicated." "Why?" "Because if I say yes, it means a lot could change. And I don't want anything to change that might take me away from you." Lily's brow furrowed, thoughtful in that sharp, perceptive way that always made Jack wonder just how much of Marcy lived in her. She closed her notebook, pushed it aside, and looked him dead in the eyes. "Dad, you sing for me every day," she said softly. "At the bus stop, in the kitchen, even when you're fixing stuff and you think I'm not listening." Jack blinked. "That's just something we do." "But it makes me happy," she said. "Like really happy. And if it makes other people happy too, I think maybe the world should hear it." He looked at her, heart squeezing tight in his chest. "You're not scared I'll be gone more?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "You'll always come back. You're my dad." And just like that, the fear didn't disappear, but it quieted. Enough for Jack to finally wonder, what if she's right? Maybe it was time. Jack pulled up to the gated townhouse in the early evening, headlights cutting through the soft orange haze of dusk. The place didn't scream. Wealth it, whispered it. Understated. Clean lines. Slate gray brick. Tasteful, not loud. He double-checked the address Julia had texted him, then sat there for a moment, engine idling, heart thudding hard against his ribs. He hadn't told anyone he was coming, not Lily. Not even his buddy Ryan at the garage. This wasn't a declaration, it was a test. One song, one night. If it felt wrong, he'd walk away and never look back. Julia met him at the door, dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, instead of her usual armor of tailored confidence. "You came," she said, voice calm but pleased. Jack nodded. "Still time to change my mind," she smirked. "I won't hold it against you." "But I don't think you will." The studio was tucked in the back of the house walls, lined with shelves of vinyl warm wood floors, vintage gear humming quietly beneath soft lights. It didn't feel like a lab or a factory. It felt like someone had built it to make music that mattered. Jack stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. His fingers drifted along the keys of an upright piano, then to the mic stand in the center of the room. "Any song you want," Julia said. "No edits, no pressure, just sing." He hesitated, then nodded once and stepped up to the mic, closed his eyes. "Let the air settle," and then he sang. It was a Balladan original, soft and aching, about missing someone you still talk to in your dreams. His voice cracked once on the second chorus. He didn't try to fix it. Didn't start over, he just kept going, the weight of every unspoken memory woven into each line. When he finished, there was silence. Julia had brought 2 of her A.R. execs to listen from the sound booth. One leaned forward, hands steepled under his chin. The other had his eyes closed, jaw slack. Julia didn't say anything at first, just sat there with her hand over her heart. Because she knew what they all did now. Jack Sullivan wasn't just good. He was undeniable. The morning rush at the garage started like any other coffee too strong. paperwork already piling, and the front office heater clicking like it was trying to die quietly. Jack wiped his hands on a towel as the first customer of the day rolled in with a sputtering Civic and a toddler kicking the back of the driver's seat. Normal stuff. He didn't notice the stares at first. Not really. It started with a teenager across the street filming him with her phone as he changed a tire. Then the delivery guy who handed him a sandwich and said, "Dude, that song that was you?" Jack blinked. "What?" The guy just grinned, holding out his phone, a YouTube thumbnail already queued up. A simple black screen with the title, "Unknown Voice, Still Here, Demo Leak." Under it, 431K views. And climbing. Jack's chest tightened. What the hell? Inside, he dropped everything and stormed to the break room, his grease-stained fingers tapping furiously on his phone. He clicked the link. The audio was raw, unpolished, but it was his. Every note, every word. The recording from Julia's studio. Someone had leaked it. The comment section was already full of fire emojis, crying faces, and guesses about the mystery singer. This voice sounds like it's been through something real. Who is this guy? If this is AI, I'm quitting music. Jack's phone buzzed Julia. Julia. I just found out. It wasn't me. I'm handling it. Please don't panic. But he was panicking. Not because of the attention. Not exactly. But because Lily didn't know. Because he'd made a promise to keep their life simple, steady, safe. And now the entire internet was chasing a name he hadn't meant to give. The bell above the garage door jingled again. 2 customers walked in. One of them, an older woman Jack had known for years, smiled as she passed. "I heard your voice this morning," she said gently. "You've been hiding something beautiful." Jack stood there, stunned. He hadn't told the world he was ready. But somehow, the world had found him anyway. The first van showed up just as Jack finished tying Lily's shoelace. It was still early, barely past sunrise, the sky painted with soft strokes of pink and blue. He stood from his crouch and froze when he saw the logo. Local news. Camera already mounted. A reporter stepping out in heels far too thin for the cracked sidewalk. "Dad," Lily whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Why are they here?" "I don't know," Jack muttered, jaw tightening. But he did know. By the time the second van rolled up, followed by a young guy in a hoodie live streaming on his phone, Jack was already shielding Lily with his body, his calm unraveling one breath at a time. The first reporter approached, mic in hand, smile wide and insincere. "Jack Sullivan? The voice behind Still Here? We'd love a quick interview." "No," he snapped, sharp and cold. "Back off." She blinked. "The public just wants to know." I said no. "This is a school bus stop, not a red carpet." Lily clung to his arm, shrinking behind him. Jack could feel her trembling. His phone buzzed. Again. "Julia," he answered without a greeting. "What did you do?" "I didn't leak it," she said, calm but tight. "It was a junior producer. I fired him. I'm trying to clean it up." "They're outside my kid's bus stop," he hissed. "That doesn't sound like cleanup." "Jack, I didn't know it would spread this fast." "You put a match to it, Julia. And now I'm the fire." A silence passed on the line. Then, softer. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix it." He hung up without another word. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Why are they filming us?" Jack knelt beside her, hands on her arms. "Hey, look at me. None of this is your fault, okay? We're going home. No school today." Her eyes were wide, confused. "Because of a song?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Because of a song." As he lifted her into the truck, shielding her from flashing lights and 2 loud voices, one thing burned clear in his mind. He'd made a mistake. He should have never let the music leave the bus stop. Jack kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting gently over Lily's knee as they drove past the school without turning in. She didn't say anything, just stared out the window, her little face pale and still. The news vans were still camped at the corner, vultures circling, cameras ready, all for a song. One song. She didn't understand the weight of it yet, but he did, and it crushed him. At home, he fixed her pancakes, even though it wasn't Sunday, letting the smell of maple syrup and butter fill the kitchen like it could chase away the morning. Lily sat at the table, poking her fork through the stack but not eating much. Her backpack sat slumped by the door, forgotten. "You okay, Bug?" he asked softly. She shrugged. "Why are people so excited about a song, Dad? You sing all the time." Jack exhaled slowly. "Sometimes the world hears something real and doesn't know how to handle it. So they turn it into noise." She tilted her head. "But it was just for me." "I know," he said, voice tight. "It was always just for you." He knelt beside her chair, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry it got so loud, sweetheart. I never meant for you to get caught in it." She looked at him, eyes serious. "Are you mad at the music?" That stopped him. Was he? He wasn't mad at the song, or the voice inside him that had refused to stay quiet. He was mad at the spotlight, at how fast the world could twist something pure into something invasive. He was mad at himself for not being more careful, for not shielding her better. "I'm not mad at the music," he said finally, "but I am mad at the mess it made. And I don't know yet if it's worth it." Lily reached for his hand. "We can figure it out, together." He smiled at her small, weary, but real. "Yeah, we can." For now, the blinds stayed closed. The door remained locked. And the only thing playing in the house was silence. But somewhere underneath, the music still pulsed waiting. By Tuesday morning, Jack couldn't even check his email without seeing his own face staring back at him from headlines he hadn't asked for. Mystery mechanic, authentic or industry plant. Widowed father goes viral too good to be true. Child in the spotlight. Is this the start of another exploited talent story? He slammed the laptop shut and shoved it off the counter, rubbing his temples. The garage was closed early, citing personal reasons, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't face customers asking about music instead of mufflers. Couldn't stand the pity, the curiosity, the attention. He looked over at Lily, curled up on the couch, with her sketchpad, headphones on, humming faintly to herself. He'd kept her home again. She didn't ask why this time. His phone buzzed. Again. Julia. He let it ring. The comments online had taken a hard turn. The moment the song hit 500,000 streams, the narrative had changed. What started as admiration turned quickly into suspicion. People demanded to know who he was, who Julia was, what really happened. Think pieces popped up by the hour. No one goes viral like this by accident. Stanton Records clearly staged its single dad as the perfect PR angle. The girl's too young. This is exploitation. Period. Jack hadn't signed a contract, hadn't asked for fame. He'd sung one song in one room. That was it. But now it was out of his hands. Finally, he answered the phone. "Jack," Julia said, voice rushed, tired. "I need to talk to you." "I've seen it," he said flatly. "They're twisting it." "I didn't authorize any press. This is just the internet doing what it does. I've got my team working around the clock to pull it back." He let out a sharp breath. "Doesn't matter if it started as truth, Julia. It's not ours anymore." There was a pause. "You thinking about walking away?" "I've got a daughter to protect," he said. "Not a brand." Silence lingered, heavy. Then Julia spoke, softer this time. "Let me fix this." "Please." Jack didn't answer. Because for the first time since he'd opened his mouth to sing, he wasn't sure if it had been worth it. The living room was dark, except for the warm glow of a single lamp. Jack sat on the edge of the couch, Lily fast asleep upstairs, her door cracked just enough for him to hear her soft breathing. A battered acoustic guitar rested across his lap, the wood worn smooth where his fingers had traced the frets for years. He hadn't written a song since before Marcy got sick. Not a full one. Bits and pieces, sure unfinished verses scribbled on receipts, melodies hummed in the garage. But this was different. This wasn't for radio. This wasn't for charts or labels or online opinions. This was for her. For Lily. For the nights she cried herself to sleep. For the mornings they laughed over burnt toast and tangled hair. For every tired step they'd taken together since the world cracked in half. He started playing, slow and deliberate. A soft, steady chord, progression simple, clean. Then came the lyrics, low and honest, his voice still rough from emotion but carrying a truth no critic could touch. It's just us two on the kitchen floor, piecing life back like it was before. No map, no plan, just your hand in mine. One breath, one laugh, one borrowed time. Each line came like a whisper, pulled from the quiet corners of his heart. There was no pretense, no polish. Just him and the guitar and everything he'd never said out loud. When he finished, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. He didn't post it. Not right away. Julia did. Without fanfare, without promotion. Just a simple caption. A father, a daughter. A life held together by love. Just us two. Listen with your heart. By morning, the video had 1 million views. By afternoon, it had a name trending. Just US too. Single parents across the world began sharing their stories beneath the hashtag photos of school drop-offs, bedtime lullabies, late-night homework marathons. The song became something more than viral. It became theirs. Jack read the comments in stunned silence. He hadn't meant to start a movement. He'd only meant to remind Lily they were still okay. But somehow, that turned out to be exactly what people needed to hear. The envelope sat in the center of the kitchen table, thick and cream-colored, printed with Stanton Records letterhead in bold serif font. Jack stared at it like it might burst into flames. Across from him, Julia sat with her hands folded, composed, but not pushy. She wasn't selling anymore. She was offering. He looked down at Lily, who was perched on a stool beside him, swinging her legs and sipping chocolate milk through a striped straw. She hadn't said much, but her eyes never left his face. "I don't want to leave," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. "I'm not chasing tour buses or stadium lights. That's not the life I want for her." "You won't have to," Julia said gently. "The contract includes full creative control, flexible scheduling, and no touring unless you initiate it. We'll start with a studio EP, regional release, and a few small local shows if you want them." He flipped through the page's percentages, rights, clauses. It was fair, better than fair. Julia had clearly gone out of her way to protect him in the language. Still, Jack had learned the hard way that even the kindest words could be twisted. So before he signed anything, he did what Marcy would have done. He called a lawyer, someone local, old school, not starstruck. 3 days later, with a few revisions in red ink, Jack sat back down at the table and looked Julia in the eye. "I'll do this," he said, "but only if I stay rooted. I pick the songs. I stay in town. Lily stays in school. And I don't trade my life for headlines." Julia smiled. "I wouldn't have offered it if I didn't already believe you were worth building around, not over." He reached for the pen, hesitating for just a second before signing his name at the bottom. Jack Sullivan. Simple, unchanged. Lily clapped quietly, then leaned in close. "Does this mean you're famous now?" Jack laughed. "I think it means we're just going to sing a little louder, that's all." He slid the signed copy back across the table. Julia took it with a nod, her expression more satisfied than triumphant. This wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning on his terms. The garage looked exactly the same as it always had, sunlight slanting in through the roll-up door, dust dancing in the air, the familiar scent of oil and steel clinging to every surface. But to Jack, everything felt different. He stood in the center of the shop floor, hands in his pockets, watching as Tyler, his apprentice of the last 4 years, ran diagnostics on a Ford with the same care and concentration Jack had taught him. "You're going to be fine," Jack said, nodding toward the car. "You always had a good ear for engines." Tyler looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's weird without you on the other side of the lift." "Probably weirder for me," Jack said with a soft smile. "I've been here more than I've been home these past 10 years. The paperwork had been signed that morning. Jack sold the garage for less than it was worth, but exactly what it needed to Benno to keep it running. enough to let Tyler grow into it. Jack didn't want a fortune, just closure. He walked through the back office one last time, brushing his fingers along the old corkboard with customer thank you notes pinned haphazardly from over the years. He found Lily's crayon drawing still stuck in the corner, Daddy fixing cars, complete with stick figures and a rainbow. He smiled and took it down. By the time he stepped out front, the sun had begun to lower in the sky, casting golden streaks across the parking lot. A few longtime customers passed by, waving. One left a box of donuts on the counter. Another just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You'll always have hands worth gold, Jack. Whatever you do." He nodded, unable to say much more than, "Thanks." Tyler came to the door as Jack turned to leave. "You sure you're ready?" "No," Jack said honestly. "But I think that's the point." He climbed into his truck, the weight of years pressed into the seat behind him. In the rearview mirror, the garage slowly faded out of view. It wasn't a loss, it was a passing of the torch. Jack didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to find out. The backstage light flickered above Jack's head as he paced slowly, his fingers twitching against the fabric of his jeans. The small venue in downtown Maple Heights wasn't anything grand-just. An old theater with creaky floorboards, 50-year-old curtains, and a few hundred mismatched seats, but to Jack, it may as well have been Madison Square Garden. 12 years. That's how long it had been since he last stood under a spotlight. He rubbed his palms together, then flexed them. His heart pounded hard enough to feel in his throat. "Dad?" a small voice whispered. He turned. Lily stood near the curtain, her head set a size too big for her head. She'd insisted on helping backstage, wearing her little crew badge like it was made of gold. She looked both proud and nervous. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes wide. He crouched down. "I'm supposed to be asking you that." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look like you're gonna throw up." "Appreciate the honesty," Jack chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Guess I'm just not used to all this again." Lily stepped closer, placing a hand over his chest. "It's just like the bus stop, only more people. Way more people." "But there's still people," she said, her tone suddenly wise beyond her years. "And they're gonna love you. I already do." Jack swallowed hard. "That means everything." A stagehand gave him the signal. 2 minutes. From the side curtain, Jack could hear the buzz of the audience. Somewhere in the middle rows, Julia sat quietly, watching the stage with the same expression she wore the first time she'd heard him sing, steady, curious, and all in. Jack stood, took one last breath, and stepped into the wings. The MC introduced him with a line he barely registered. Then the lights shifted, the room hushed, and Jack Sullivan walked onto the stage, guitar in hand, nerves buzzing through every inch of him. But as the first chord rang out, and he looked over to see Lily peeking through the curtain, smiling wide and mouthing, "You got this," the fear faded. It wasn't the bus stop, but it was still his. Julia sat across from the network execs in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city, her arms crossed, coffee cooling untouched at her elbow. They were already 2 slides into the pitch deck buzzwords like authenticity, heartland appeal, and real American voice bouncing off the walls like confetti. "Let me stop you right there," she said, holding up a hand. "If you're here to sell me a reality show, this meeting's over." The younger exec blinked. "It's not reality TV. It's a docu-series, a real one. Minimal interference. We just want to follow Jack's journey, his music, his family, the transition." Julia raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you think he'd even say yes?" The older one leaned forward. "Because this isn't about selling him. It's about showing what happens when the world finds someone who never asked to be found. It's about truth and control. He gets final cut approval. Full rights to the footage." That last part made her pause. Later that night, she met Jack at his favorite diner just. The two of them, 2 mugs of black coffee between them, and the low hum of neon lights overhead. Lily had already gone home with a sitter after the performance. She was still buzzing, practically floating when he'd tucked her in. "A docu-series?" Jack said slowly, stirring his coffee, even though he hadn't added anything. "You serious?" Julia nodded. "The network's legit. Their last project won an Emmy. They want to follow your story, not rewrite it." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Feels invasive." "It could be," she admitted. "But you'd have say over every frame. No manipulation. You decide what they show and what they don't." Jack was quiet for a long time. "And Lily?" "They agreed she's off limits unless you decide otherwise." He tapped a finger against his mug. "I didn't do this for fame, Julia. I sang because it was all I had left. Now it feels like people want to turn it into a brand." "I get that," she said gently. "But sometimes letting people see the real story, that's what cuts through the noise." Jack exhaled. "One condition." "Name it. I keep the pen. No one else writes my story but me." Julia smiled. "Deal." The message came late, just past midnight, long after Jack had tucked Lily into bed and retreated to the quiet of the living room, guitar in hand, fingers picking absent-mindedly at a melody that wasn't quite finished. His phone buzzed against the coffee table. "Unknown number. Saw the show clip. You still play like it's your last day on Earth." "Proud of you, man." Ray. Jack froze, the name hitting harder than the words themselves. Raymond Keller. He hadn't seen or spoken to Ray since the night the band fell apart. 12 years ago in a dim motel parking lot, just outside of Nashville, when Jack packed up and left after the call about Marcy. No arguments, no explanations, just an unspoken understanding that life had shifted, and Jack had to follow it. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure what to say. Then finally, "Jack, didn't think I'd hear from you again." "Ray, didn't think I'd ever see you again." That voice, "It's better now." "Stronger, Jack, life'll do that to you." They talked for almost an hour. Text turned into a call, easy, despite the years. They laughed about old gigs, inside jokes that hadn't been spoken aloud in over a decade. But it wasn't all nostalgia. There was weight there, too. "I always thought you'd be the one to make it," Ray said over the line. "But you left." "I had to," Jack replied. "Marcy needed me. Lily was just a baby." "I know. I didn't blame you. I just missed the music." There was a pause, filled only by the sound of Ray's breath and Jack's strumming in the background. "Look," Ray said carefully, "I got a small studio out in Asheville now. Just me and a couple of guys, nothing fancy. But if you ever wanted to play again collab, right, just jam, I'd make space for you in a heartbeat." Jack stared at the ceiling. A part of him ached at the offer, at what could have been, and what might still be. "Let me think on it," he said softly. "No pressure. Just don't disappear this time." "I won't," Jack promised, even if he didn't fully know what that meant yet, because some music wasn't done being written. The invitation came folded in thick, cream-colored cardstock, tucked inside an envelope with gold trim. Jack opened it at the kitchen table while Lily munched cereal beside him, barely paying attention until she caught the words "duet performance" and "special guest." He read the line again, slowly. "We'd be honored if Lily Sullivan would join her father on stage to perform a short duet at our annual Hope Hearts Charity Gala." Lily's spoon clattered against the bowl. "Me? On stage?" Jack looked up, brows raised. "Looks like it." Her eyes went wide, uncertain. "Do I have to?" "No," he said gently. "You don't have to do anything." "But they saw that video from the living room, the one where we sang together. They loved it. Thought you might want to share it live." Lily didn't answer right away. She swung her legs beneath the chair, deep in thought. Then, after a long pause, she looked up and said, "Only if we sing my song." Jack grinned. "Deal." They rehearsed in the evenings, just the two of them on the couch, her small voice rising with every verse, his deeper tones wrapping around hers like safety. Julia offered to bring in vocal coaches, stylists, even backup musicians. Jack said no to all of it. "This is Lily's moment," he told her. Not a production. The night of the event, Lily wore a simple blue dress and sparkly sneakers, nothing fancy, Just her. Jack wore jeans, a blazer, and a smile so nervous it almost cracked his cool. Backstage, Lily held his hand tightly. "You think they'll like it?" Jack knelt beside her. "Doesn't matter what they think. You sing for you, and for Mom." That got a small nod. Then the lights dimmed. They stepped onto the stage together. The crowd leaned in, quiet, curious. And then Lily sang. Soft at first, a little shaky, but her voice held something pure honest in a way auto-tune could never replicate. By the time they reached the second chorus, the room was still, spellbound. When the last note faded, the silence broke into thunderous applause. Lily beamed, cheeks flushed, eyes shining. In that moment, Jack wasn't the only star anymore. He was a father, watching his daughter find her light. The shop-turned studio was quiet, bathed in the golden haze of a late afternoon sun filtering through the windows. Jack stood near the mixing board, tuning his guitar, trying to distract himself from the growing hum online. His EP, Just Us Two, had been out for 6 weeks. The songs were honest, raw, simple exactly how he wanted them. No frills, no big campaign, just stories wrapped in chords. He'd barely paid attention to the buzz. Some playlist features. A late-night interview. A handful of sold-out shows in small theaters. Enough to make noise. Not enough to expect anything more. So when Julia showed up, unannounced, standing in the open doorway with something clutched in her hand, Jack's heart skipped. "What's that look for?" he asked warily, wiping his hands on a rag. She didn't answer right away. Just walked in slowly, that rare flicker of emotion playing at the edges of her perfectly composed expression. Then she held it out. A thick envelope, embossed seal. Academy logo stamped across the front. Jack stared at it like it was in a foreign language. "Go on," she said. He opened it with fingers that weren't quite steady, his eyes scanning the official letter. "Dear Mr. Sullivan, we are honored to inform you that you have been nominated for the Grammy Award for Best New Artist." He blinked. Once. Twice. "No," he muttered. Julia smiled. "Yes." He looked up at her, dazed. "This can't be real. You're standing in a studio you built with your bare hands, with a daughter who sings like the sun, and an album that made half the country cry in their cars," she said. "It's very real." Jack dropped into the nearest chair, the letter still in hand. He didn't say anything for a long while, just sat there breathing it in. "Does Lily know?" he finally asked. "I wanted you to tell her." He laughed under his breath. "She's gonna think I'm making it up." "You're going to the Grammys, Jack," Julia said softly. "This isn't a dream anymore." But as he looked down at the letter, one word flashing over and over nominated it, still felt exactly like one. The morning air was cool, just like it had been that first time before the cameras, before the contracts, before anyone knew his name beyond a garage invoice. Jack parked a block away on purpose. No entourage, no crew, no security, just him and Lily, bundled in jackets, hands wrapped around steaming cups of cocoa. The old bus stop hadn't changed. Same crooked sign, same cracked sidewalk. A little rustier, maybe. A little quieter now that the media had long since moved on. They stood there side by side, watching the sun crawl over the rooftops. The world hadn't stopped turning just because theirs had spun a little faster for a while. "Looks smaller now," Lily said, brushing a leaf off the curb. Jack smiled. "Maybe you just got bigger." She looked up at him, eyes shining beneath the edge of her knitted hat. "Do you still remember the song?" Jack didn't answer. He just started humming. The same tune they used to sing when she was nervous for school, when her backpack seemed too heavy and the world too loud. A simple soul melody. Something soft, steady, and theirs. Lily joined in by the second line. Their voices danced together in the early light knot for applause, not for streams or stages, but for each other. A quiet duet in a forgotten corner of a small town. The kind of moment that wouldn't trend, wouldn't go viral, but meant more than any trophy sitting on a polished shelf. When they finished, The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of memory. Of gratitude, of everything that had changed, and everything that never would. Jack glanced down at her. "You miss this?" Lily nodded. "Sometimes. But I like what we have now, too." He squeezed her hand gently. "Me too." They stayed a little longer, sipping cocoa and watching the school buses rumble by, none of them stopping for her anymore. She didn't need them to, because she'd already found her way. And Jack had found his voice. Right there, where it all began. The rooftop terrace of Julia's townhouse was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of string lights and the occasional flicker of distant city traffic below. Jack sat across from her, guitar resting against his knee, 2 empty wine glasses between them, and the kind of silence that wasn't awkward but heavy with things unsaid. Julia stared out over the skyline, arms folded loosely, her posture as composed as ever. But Jack had come to recognize the difference between her polished stillness and the moments she was holding something in. "You ever miss it?" he asked quietly. She turned. "Miss what?" "Singing." The question lingered. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've done your homework." "I've heard the old records," Jack said. "Your voice was different, honest." Julia looked away again, toward the horizon. "My dad used to say the same thing, said my voice made people stop breathing." Jack stayed quiet, sensing the weight of where she was headed. "He left when I was 12, she said, voice low. No warning, just gone. Took his guitar and disappeared like he never wanted to be a father in the first place. I spent the next 10 years trying to sing loud enough to drown out what that meant." Jack swallowed. "I'm sorry." Julia shook her head. "It's just part of my wiring now. I built Stanton Records because I thought if I couldn't be enough for him, I could be everything for someone else's talent. I could protect them. Build something that didn't walk away." She turned back to Jack, her gaze sharper, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen it. "But after a while, I stopped singing altogether. Too many people were listening, and none of them were the one person I wanted to hear me." Jack nodded slowly. "You think you'll ever sing again?" "I didn't think so," she said. "Not until I saw you at that bus stop. You weren't performing. You were giving something real to someone you love." Her voice softened. "You reminded me that music doesn't have to be survival. It can just be home." They sat in silence again. Not heavy now, but full, of stories, of healing, of everything that had been lost and maybe, just maybe, found again. The lights in the theater dimmed until only a single spotlight remained, casting a soft circle on the center of the stage. The crowd at the Grammys restless, buzzing with celebrity chatter, and flashing cameras fell into a hush as the announcer's voice echoed through the room. "And now, performing his nominated track, Just Us Two, please welcome Jack Sullivan." No pyrotechnics. No band, just Jack. He stepped into the light with his guitar slung over one shoulder, dressed in a charcoal suit that didn't try too hard, and boots still dusty at the soles. He paused at the mic, the room stretching silent before him like an ocean of faces he'd never expected to see. Somewhere in the wings, Lily watched, a nervous smile lighting up her whole face, and in the front row, Julia sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, blinking fast. Jack adjusted the mic, took a slow breath, and began. No backing track. No harmony, just his voice. "It's just us two on the kitchen floor, piecing life back like it was before." The first chord rang out like a heartbeat. His voice wasn't flawless. It cracked, a little dry from nerves, a little raw from truth. But it was real. It carried every sleepless night, every burnt dinner, every whispered promise he made to Lily when the world felt too big for just the two of them. It carried grief and hope and love that doesn't always have the right words. No gold, no fame, just your hand in mine. One song, one chance, one borrowed time. Halfway through the second verse, Lily reached out to Julia and took her hand. Julia gripped it gently, her other hand already wiping a tear that had slipped free. When Jack finished the final line, he let the silence breathe, let the room sit with it. Then, slowly, the applause began. A single clap, then a dozen, then hundreds. A standing ovation that rose like a tide, lifting everything with it. But Jack didn't smile. Not yet. He just looked out into the crowd until he found Lily. She mouthed, "You did it." And for the first time, he believed it. Because tonight, the world didn't just hear a song, they heard his. And it began, as all the best ones doeth love.